Hi, Loretta. How are you?
Great. Nice to see you.
Same here. Yeah, so I'm really excited to have you here. I've always found it very interesting just to understand the brain. And I feel like when it comes to midlife, by the time you get to sort of like your 40s, you've got a lot of habits that have sort of anchored in. And it's also a time of reflection and change. And I feel like it's a really good time to kind of revisit what our neurotransmitters are doing for us. So that's why I thought, it'd be amazing to have Loretta Breuning. She's the founder of the Inner Mammal Institute and professor emeritus of management at California State University. She is the author of many personal development books. I think the most recent one was The Social Order, but also you may have heard of Happy Brain, retrain your brain to boost your serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphin levels. So that's a mouthful, but we're going to learn all about it from Loretta. So thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. Happy to be
Loretta,
here.
would you like to just tell everyone a little bit about what sort of got you into your field of work? It's always interesting to hear people's paths and how they got to where they are.
Sure. Well, I've been through many different careers. I was a college professor for 25 years, and that was not making me happy. And I was very lucky to get to take early retirement at 50. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I think we're very shaped by our childhood. When I was a kid, there was a lot of anxiety and conflict around me. And I was always wondering, what is everybody so upset about? And I looked and tried to find the answers in science, and it wasn't making sense for me what I found. So I kept digging, and I found the brain chemicals that we've inherited from earlier animals. And what they do in animals is so clearly what we are doing today. And I was frustrated that that was not widely explained in psychology because it's not what we want to hear. So that's why I was so committed to making that information available.
Yeah, wonderful. I think the way you explain the brain is just so empowering. So I thought maybe we could try and connect it back to things that come up in midlife. And one of the things that I hear often from my clients is anxiety, like how anxiety pops in. And people really start to struggle more. And yes, it's, a dip in hormones, but there's also other things going on. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. But do we want to start by going through each of the neurotransmitters or?
Well, since you brought up anxiety, why don't we do that first?
Sure.
Okay, so we have the chemical cortisol that most people have heard of as the stress chemical. Yeah. And the word stress is unfortunate because people have come to use it as blaming the world for their stress rather than understanding the chemical that we are triggering in ourselves. Mm-hmm. So what triggers all of our chemicals, good or bad, is neural pathways built from past experience. So whatever triggered your cortisol in your past built a pathway that turns it on today. So for example, if you touch a hot stove, it builds a huge pathway, and then next time you see the stove, you pull your hand back in time to protect yourself. So we're always trying to protect ourselves by turning on this bad chemical in advance. Mm-hmm. And by the time of midlife, we've had ever so many burns, let's say. And the chemical cortisol actually makes you feel like a predator is about to eat you because that's the job it evolved to do. So that's why you could say from the perspective of our conscious brain that we overreact a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that cortisol playing in also impacts your progesterone. And that's that cycle that people are struggling with. Yeah. It's really interesting when you look at it that way. So, so it's like a pattern over time. God, you think about even just the last 2 years and that fear cycle. How do you go about shifting that?
Sure. Well, first, one other really important thing about cortisol is disappointment triggers cortisol. And that's amazing because let's say if your friends forgot your birthday, you don't consciously equate that with a predator eating you. But when you're disappointed, when your happy chemicals droop or when you expect happy chemicals and you don't get them, your brain sees that as a survival threat. And to understand that, we don't consciously think we care about survival, but that's the job our brain evolved to do. And that's what controls your happy chemicals, your mammalian brain that cares about survival. So if a lion is chasing a gazelle and the gazelle gets away, that's a matter of life or death, because sometimes a lion doesn't eat for days. So it has to choose between, it really hates to give up on that gazelle because it's so hungry. But if you chase something that's already gotten away, you're going to die of starvation. So this is the uncomfortable feeling we have of like, I want it so much. I've already worked so hard to get it. But if I keep investing in that, I think I'm going to be even worse off. So we're always weighing the evidence with a brain that evolved to make good decisions. And yet the chemicals that make these decisions, we interpret them as survival messages because that's how our animal brain works. And the animal brain is the lower nonverbal part of your brain, the limbic system, which includes the amygdala, the hippocampus, and things like that. Yeah. And it can't process language, so it can't tell you in words what it's doing. And that's why we get into these spin cycles.
Yeah. No, it's so true, because, a lot of people don't realize they're stressed or there is a stress response in their body, because they've been that their whole life. And so they don't even feel different. But it sounds like, that's something that's happening, subconsciously. Interesting.
Oh, and you asked me about, so in the last year. So if people are glued to the news and they're opening their mind to constant bad information, and then maybe they're disappointed because they're not able to practice their usual strategies for stimulating happy chemicals. So you could see how those two things together, less happy chemicals, more cortisol. If you know how you're doing this to yourself, then you could redirect yourself to understand what triggers happy chemicals, what do I need to do to trigger them, and not wait for the world to give them to you.
Yeah, is that, I guess, a little bit why, like, you always see people doing like news fasts or like social media fasts, pulling themselves away for a while, realizing, wow, like I actually feel amazing again. But then we keep going back. Any advice there on like how to use social media differently, knowing what your brain chemicals are doing?
Sure. So the first thing is not to blame the device. I hear so much of this, like it's Facebook's fault and it's your phone's fault, because you lose your power when you blame the device. So the idea is really to know that your brain is creating it with neural pathways built from past experience. Right. The past experience was that great feeling you got when you got some good news, or the bad feeling you got when someone said to you, hey, I wrote to you and you didn't reply. So all of those things wired you. Now, the other huge thing is social comparison. So we are constantly comparing ourselves to others because that's how mammals survive. If a mammal is smaller than the mammal around it, it's going to get bitten when it reaches for a banana or a mating opportunity. So it doesn't want to get bitten, but it wants to get the banana. So it always compares itself to others and finds an opportunity to be in the one-up position. And then its brain rewards it with the good feeling of serotonin. And that's the good feeling we're looking for all the time. And if we admit to ourselves that we want that one-up feeling because that's what our brain evolved to do, and then stop blaming the device or the world for that feeling. And it's hard to find healthy ways to stimulate it, but that's our job.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because you think about it, that's probably more apparent in high school, isn't it? Because like it's really obvious, like it's all about that status game. But then you sort of forget about it and you go into your career and your job and whatever you're passionate about. But then sometimes it comes up again for people, sort of, midlife crisis, when people are starting to feel, I don't know if that's the connection, but maybe they're not feeling as fulfilled in their work or as fulfilled in their lives, or maybe they didn't get to where they thought they would be, and they start sort of analyzing everything in their life. Is that a little bit of that going on? Like potentially not.
Yeah, but also measuring? Your brain is always putting out fires because that's the job it evolved to do. And the other thing is it's worried about keeping your genes alive. That's natural selection built a brain that rewards you with a good feeling when you do things that keep your genes alive. So first, when you're a teenager, you need to get social acceptance to to keep your genes alive, literally to get social acceptance.
Mhm.
And so that gets all of your attention. Then you have children to keep your genes alive, and that gets all your attention. And then you got to get a job to support them. So as soon as you're not putting out fires and doing all these urgent things, as soon as you have a little free time,
Mm.
then it's harder to trigger your happy chemicals because they are stimulated by meeting an urgent survival need.
Mhm.
And once your urgent needs are met, then you look for bigger ways to meet them. And then you dream big. And that's where we get into what you said, where people have these big dreams and then they're disappointed. No one realizes it's because, but I actually got a lot done. So that's why I have enough free time and energy to worry about these big dreams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're always looking to figure out, I guess, like that whole empty nest that's sometimes happening for people, like you said, which is really interesting. And I think subconsciously we do things like, I know I got a dog and I didn't even realize how important that was until after I had her. Not that I got it for the kids, but I think I got it more for myself subconsciously, because it's that feeling of being needed, right? It's like it's boosting your happiness. Yeah, so interesting. Okay.
And it's reliable.
And
that's the thing about the pandemic, is the reliable way to boost your happy chemicals versus having to blaze a new trail to your happy chemicals, which is just a skill that we can learn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what are some other ways that you can boost your happy chemicals? Or
let me explain them from one at a time for dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, because my work is revolved around what triggers these chemicals in animals to get the specific facts about them rather than this generalized happy talk that we tend to hear.
Okay, so yeah, let's break it down to the chemicals. So do you want to start with serotonin?
May I start with dopamine?
Dopamine?
And do
Okay.
serotonin last, because that's the one that is guaranteed to upset people.
Okay.
So dopamine is the good feeling that you're about to get a reward. So in the animal world, they don't have a refrigerator. When they're hungry, they have to look for food. If they see food in the distance, dopamine turns on, makes you feel good, and motivates you to move forward. So we're always looking for something that will meet our needs. And then the good feeling motivates us to step forward, and each step motivates more. But when you get the thing, the good feeling stops and the dopamine turns off. And that makes sense if you think about our ancestors looking for water, finding an oasis in the distance. Once you get enough water, water doesn't make you a bit happy. So it takes an unmet need to stimulate dopamine. And because our core basic needs are met in daily life so easily, then people have the energy left to worry about minutia, let's say, and look for other ways to meet their needs.
So is that kind of like I remember reading a book on happiness. I don't remember the author, but they talked about the importance of like having something to look forward to, like planning a trip. So I've never been a fan of like surprise parties, like, because like half the fun is looking forward to it, right? It's like that buildup of like, oh my God, I'm so excited. That's
Exactly. So we always need something we can look forward to.
Yeah.
And you know that a lot of life is unpredictable, and it's nice to have surprises, because then you get an extra boost when you get more than you expect. But you also need things to look forward to.
Yes.
And you need to plan something that you have control over, because if you wait for the world to give it to you, you might be disappointed.
Yes. Okay. I like that. Yeah. And when it comes to, like, you think about food and diet, when it comes to that, it can be even as simple as, you've eaten a really healthy food all day. Maybe this is a good thing, maybe this is a bad thing, but maybe you reward yourself with like a piece of dark chocolate after dinner or something like that. And it's sort of like, I guess it's doing, it's a positive way. Instead of
Yes.
like, I think our cult's funny. There've been a lot of sort of posts on the wine chocolate, wine chocolate, wine chocolate. You see those? Everyone's like, it's keeping people going. Um, and I wonder if there might be healthier ways to just give ourselves a boost and use
Yes.
dopamine, right?
Yes. So anything that you can plan for yourself. And I always say to plan a long-term goal, a short-term goal, and a middle-term goal, because
Mhm.
you can't always make progress toward your goal. And when one path is blocked, you can shift to another. So a long-term goal could be building a skill that might bring you a future that you want. And maybe you don't have much time for your long-term goal, but if you put 10 minutes on it a day, set a timer, make a deal with yourself that you're going to spend 10 minutes a day on that dream. Then a middle-term goal is something that you really need to do, but you've been putting off. And even that, you can do it, in small chunks. And like, even if you set a timer and spend a half hour on it a day, that you will feel so good after you got that done.
Yeah.
And then a short-term goal would be like, for example, what movie am I going to watch tonight? What movie am I going to want and watch tomorrow night? Well, a lot of times people sit in front of the television and say, there's nothing good on. But if you put in like 10 minutes of effort to screen through movies and find something you love and then look forward to it.
Yeah, I love that. That's so great. We've been making time to do just that and to find more funny things based on our world right now. So yeah. Okay. So that was really interesting. So do we want to talk about oxytocin
Great.
next, or okay? So tell us a little bit about that.
Oxytocin is often called the love chemical or the bonding hormone. And people are given the impression that it's stimulated by hugging. But this is a gross oversimplification that often leaves people disappointed. So in the animal world, you look for a herd to be safe. So for example, when a zebra is surrounded by its herd, it can eat. But if it's not with a herd, then you're always looking for a predator and you can't really relax and eat. So we love the good feeling that it's safe to let down your guard because you have social support. And that's what the chemical oxytocin creates. So we are always looking for that social support so that we can let down our guard. And trust is a nice word for this. But because it's been so over idealized, like we're given the impression that we should trust everyone or everyone should support us. And that's not the way it's designed to work, because if you trust everyone, then you would make bad decisions and trust people you shouldn't trust. And then you're always disappointed with the world because you think, I want to be with my herd and they should lay down their life for me. But then you see that they're only in it for themselves because they want protection from the lion. And you got to admit to yourself that you want protection from the lion too. And then you understand that modern trust is reciprocal, that you don't want to just be a herd follower. You don't want to stay in the tribe you were born with and follow them every second of your life like a sheep in a flock. You want some independence, and all animals have like moments where they step away from the herd to get better grass, and then they step back to the herd for protection. So this is a selfish animal impulse. And when you understand that, then you can manage it in a healthy way and create healthy social alliances that stimulate your oxytocin.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So, well, I imagine this would be really tricky for, often in midlife, people are sometimes experiencing divorce or, changing directions, and that would be really challenging. So it's about finding those trusting relationships that are going to help you sort of feel safe, right?
Yes, but also being realistic about the relationships. Like a lot of divorces are caused by the idea that you think this person's going to make you feel good every minute, and then you don't feel good, and then you leave them thinking that you're going to find someone else who makes you feel good every minute. And then you may learn when it's too late that you don't have that. So I'm not saying that, I mean, I've been divorced too, so I'm not saying that it's always a bad thing. But,
no, exactly. Yeah. Okay.
But we look for a herd in our mammal brain, but then our human brain has to be realistic. And so I think of it as a network of alliances.
Okay.
So that maybe one day you and I exchange a moment of trust, and then tomorrow I exchange a moment of trust with someone else. But then a year later, I may have another moment of trust with you.
Mm-hmm.
And when I trust myself to have that network, then my inner mammal feels safe.
Okay. Yeah. This is so interesting. Okay. So, so that's dope, or that's oxytocin. So it's not just about hugs. It's about trust and connection. So how about the endorphins? I think most people are familiar with endorphins. They always think of like sports and thrilling events and things like that. Let's talk about that. I'd love to hear your perspective.
Sure. So I talk the least about this one because endorphin is our body's natural opioid. It evolved to mask pain, and it's triggered by real physical pain. And we're not designed to inflict pain on ourselves to get it. So if you know anyone who's going out of their way to inflict pain on themselves to feel good, then I don't think that's the path to happiness. And I just want to be clear in all of my work that I'm not recommending that. But many people are given that idea, and they don't realize that as soon as the endorphin stops, you're back where you were without the dopamine, oxytocin, or serotonin, unless you did something to trigger those. So that's where our focus needs to be. And endorphin is just for emergencies. However, I do say that you get a little bit from laughing, because laughing triggers deep abdominal muscles that we don't use very much. So plan to leave time for laughing, and plan to laugh by making your own sense of humor your priority rather than only going along with what other people think is funny.
Yes. Okay, that's interesting, because so it wanes. It's temporary. So, all right. So now we're on to the juicy one. So I'm sure everyone's curious to hear about serotonin. You hear about that a lot, because that does start to decrease when your estrogen levels start to decrease. And I think that's a lot of time, women experience low mood and depression when they hit their, kind of 35 plus, 40 plus. And then they're not sure what's coming from, right? Not everyone's prepared for that. They might think of hot flashes as perimenopause, but really part of it can be that low mood. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
Sure. So serotonin is your brain's reward for finding the one-up feeling. It's the calm confidence that tells a monkey that it's okay to reach for the banana. So instead of thinking yourself as the little monkey who will always get bitten if they reach for anything, it tells a monkey, I'm strong enough to hold my own in this group and to reach for that banana because I'm bigger and stronger than the monkeys next to me. Now that may sound crude and nasty and mean, and we don't like to think of ourselves that way, even though we could see that that's what other people are doing all the time. We've inherited a brain that compares itself to others and looks for the one-up position because that rewards us with serotonin. But the serotonin is soon gone. Your body metabolizes it. So that's why we have to find a one-up position again and again and again. And if you're in a stage in life where you're telling yourself, my time is over, I'm not relevant, nobody cares about me, you're going to deprive yourself of serotonin.
That's so interesting. Yeah. And then we start playing those silly games of like, oh, I'm wrinkled, because our society does value that. And you feel like that makes a lot of sense. So it's harder to feel that feeling, is to feel that one up. In a society like that. Okay, interesting. So, I mean, that could be interesting in your work as well. Like sometimes people leave their jobs, right, out of the blue, and they start different careers altogether. Or like you said, you left or you retired when you were 50. I'd love to hear your experience actually through perimenopause. Do you remember what it was like?
Yeah. Well, I left my husband and left my job. Yeah, I have to say. Yeah. Okay. So it's one thing to be aware that our time is limited. And so our rational human brain is aware of time, even though our mammal brain is not. Animals are not really aware of death. but our human brain is. So your human brain is constantly feeding your mammal brain this message, like, you are not going to survive. And your mammal brain is saying, I want to survive, I want to survive. And your human brain is saying, you're not going to survive.
Right.
So we have to do something that gives us a sense of legacy, that helps us, distracts us from the feeling that we won't survive.
Oh, interesting. So that's why we start sort of looking for more meaningful things. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and when you're investing in your children,
Yeah.
that creates your legacy and gives you a sense that you're going to survive. But at a certain age, if you invest all of your energy into your children, it's counterproductive.
Mhm.
So you have to invest that energy into something else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I've always been very conscious of that because I met a lot of women growing up who were, they didn't work and they just looked after their kids, and then they went into deep depressions when their kids left. And I've always been very aware of that, like trying to make sure that I had my own stuff as well, just to prepare for that moment, which I'm already dreading and not looking forward to. But yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so this is so cool. There's some really great quick tip sheets, you guys, if you want to take a look at Loretta's website. So definitely go there. There's lots of infographics on what we just talked about. What other advice do you have? If you had to sort of leave us with one little tip or bit of advice, what would it be if you had to pick one thing? What should we do with all
Sure.
of this?
So you are always activating your chemicals with old neural pathways that you built when you were young without being aware of it. And we can build new neural pathways, but it's as hard as learning a foreign language in adulthood, because when you're young, you have a lot of neuroplasticity. That's why children learn language without studying. But we know that everyone could learn a language if they want. It's just not fun. And in the same way, you could rewire your emotions. So if you only target one at a time, if you feel bad about X, how would you like to feel about X? And feed your brain a different way of looking at it. Like a simple example would be, once you get older, I'm so glad I'm older because now I get to do X. And then do it, and then focus on that, and you will, with repetition, build a new pathway.
I love that. I remember someone saying, about aging, that be thankful for every year you have. Like, don't be shy about it, because a lot of people never make it to the age you're at. And so you want to celebrate that. And I've totally shifted my mindset on that. And and think of all, I love that. So just think about all the amazing things you can do now that you have more time. Interesting. So anything else you want to share before we sign off? This was really interesting.
Thank you so much. Well, I have lots of resources to help people understand their inner mammal better. I have lots of books, and free resources include lots of videos, lots of podcasts, and lots of infographics, as you mentioned. And my website is innermammalinstitute.org. innermammalinstitute.org.
Thank you so much. We're going to put the link right down below. You guys definitely make sure you go. I've spent lots of time on her website and it's incredible. And thank you so much, Loretta. You are just a wealth of knowledge, and I really, really enjoyed our chat today. So I look forward to continuing to learn more about these amazing neurochemicals. I'm definitely going to grab your book. So
fabulous.
Thank you again. All
Look
right.
forward to talking to you again. Bye.
Bye.